Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar series. Our webinar today is deemed Leading in the Post-Pandemic World. And there's a big debate whether we are in the middle of it or we are getting out of it. So that is the reason why we have convened the webinar today. My name is Agnes Ruoro, a leadership faculty at Strathmore University Business School, and also the Regional Academic Director for the New Managers Leadership Program. We are delighted to have you here. So I'm here to officially welcome all of you so that we can have an interactive session on today's agenda. We envision that this particular session will zero in a little bit more on what life has been like for new managers and emerging leaders. But when I flipped quickly through the audience, I took notice that we have CEOs in our audience, we have directors, we have entrepreneurs, and we also have a very good representation across the East African region, West Africa, Central and Southern Africa. So I'm happy to say that we are also more of a Pan-African webinar today. And we will be sharing experiences across the continent and perhaps even beyond the continent on how the pandemic has affected our business and how we have responded as leaders. I would like to welcome our audience to say hi to us on the chat. Tell us your name, tell us your organization, tell us where you're dialing in from so we can get to know how the conversation should take shape, at least from the panelists, and to also really get to hear perspectives from across the continent. So I'm waiting to see some messages on the chat popping as you say hi, telling us where you're dialing in from, telling us what perhaps your expectation today is. Just a bit of housekeeping. We would like to invite all of you to engage in this session. Use the chat function to throw in your ideas, your thoughts, and and to ensure that we have an interaction with the audience and the panelists. Use the Q&A function to send your questions through to our panelists. I will be reading and monitoring the Q&A and the chat so that we can ensure nothing gets lost in there. And I'd like to also introduce the team from Strathmore Business School, the support team. We have Clive Asande, we have Caroline Munene, and we have Gift. So in case you need to communicate something in private so that we can address any of your concerns and needs while you're on this webinar, please reach out to the Strathmore Business School team and we'll be there to help and support you. And now I'm so delighted to welcome our panelists. Maybe you can wave panelists from where you are so we get to see you. We have Dr. Adriana Liamba dialing in from Tanzania. Thank you. We can see the wave. Thank you, Dr. Adriana, for dialing in, and more so for accepting to honor us with your presence. Dr. Adriana is a seasoned industry leader, currently serving at Airtel in Tanzania as the customer service director, looking after client experience. I think we are privileged because she's going to tell us how she has been managing all the call centers, the managers, all working from home. She brings in a wealth of experience from banking as well, having worked in ABSA for close to 20 years and Standard Chartered Group. So she's bringing in a wealth of experience from across different industries and multinational businesses. We also have Mr. Fred Ruoro. A lot of people have asked whether this is my brother, so we'll be giving you a tip at the end of the session. So stay tuned. Fred is the managing director at CIC Group in charge of general business. He has a wealth of experience also from the insurance industry, cutting across from Old Mutual and UAP as one brand. So Fred has been in the insurance business, and therefore is going to bring in a totally different perspective. And we're going to be looking at whether there's going to be a convergence in how different industries and sectors have really looked at leadership in the new normal. In absentia, we have Joseph Ajal. He was to dial in from Uganda, Kampala, to give us the perspectives of how business has been in Kampala. So once he joins on the call, I will be able to introduce him. I can see him connecting. I think we'll have the privilege of having him listen as we kick off. So welcome all. As we're waiting for Joseph, I've got one question to kick all of us off. And the question I am really curious to hear from you, our audience, is what are the top 3 leadership competencies and skills? What are the top 3 leadership competencies and skills that have served you so well during the pandemic, or that you found yourself demanding of yourself a lot more than any other skill? Curious to hear from you as you dial in to say hi to all of us, and we'll be ready to kick off. Thank you, Lillian, from EAC Kasoa, all the way from Entebbe. Thank you so much and welcome. I'm waiting to hear what are some of the skills leaders have utilized most, and we're ready to kick off.
So Agnes, I think I could take that one first. So it's a pleasure to be here and to meet you all, the panelists and the attendees, and Strathmore Business School for the opportunity to participate. Now, a brief introduction of myself. My name is Fred Ruoro, and as Agnes has indicated, I'm an insurance professional with many years of experience, starting from being an officer, doing clerical work, to management. And right now, I'm the managing director of the short-term arm of CIC Group. CIC is an insurance company, insurance group, with their headquarters in Kenya. We're in South Sudan, we're in Uganda, and in Malawi. So for the people in Uganda, hello to you. And I don't know if there's anyone from Malawi. It is my pleasure. So again, as we speak today, we are going through a very difficult time, and I know a lot of us have been affected. The people we love have been affected. I'd like to say pole sana, and I pray if you have been affected, if you are struggling with COVID, may you recover quickly so that we can go back to our old life that we were used to. Now, the question relating to what leadership skill, what top 3 leadership skills, I would actually, Agnes, isolate it, call it, what one skill have I found most valuable? And I think as a leader, as a managing director during the COVID, when it was starting out, the entire phase I've been a managing director overseeing different teams. And one critical skill that I found very valuable is communication. Communicating to your people, sharing the concerns you have about the pandemic. Is it going to come to Kenya? I think that was the first question. And what should we do? You get to hear, once the first case is reported, again, you bring everybody together. And eventually now, on a regular basis, you are meeting to explore how are our customers, how have they been affected? How can we protect them? How can we make them better? So I would say the first and the foremost thing that has come to me in my mind is the issue of communication. It is a very critical skill in leadership, but more so during the COVID time. So there are others, I would say, is the issue of being resilient, where sometimes you feel like you want to give in and the business is struggling. You can see your customers are struggling. but again, hanging on in there and having a learning mindset where even if the business is going through challenging, you are looking, what lessons do I need to learn? What lessons am I learning with that through this? Back to you, Agnes.
Thanks a lot, Fred. I'm going to get on to you, Adriana, and ask you, what has business been like with the pandemic, through the pandemic, and now we've got a vaccine, so it's looking very hopeful. And how does business continue to affect us as leaders, even as we hope for a post-pandemic transition season?
Okay, thank you, Agnes. From my side, what I would say is that currently the pandemic situation has been able to change our ways of working. We had to adapt new ways of working in terms of leveraging the business to continue while actually people working at home. In terms of performance management, we are used of everything we were doing in the office. Now we had to turn around the new ways of working, that now the performance management needs to be tracked while at home. Yes, there's this hope, but this particular hope still, we still need to leverage what else more can we do in terms of, instead of doing manual things, now most of the things needs to go through automation, having different options to drive the customer experience through the self-care, through apps, through interactive voice recording. All these kind of things had to be implemented to be able to make the business running smooth. Thank you, Agnes.
Thank you so much. I hear something very interesting about what we have all had to experience, which has been working from home. And I can imagine that for new managers, it has even been harder to craft policies and to define what is acceptable and not acceptable. So I'm bringing in this aspect of policy because Joseph Ajal, our panelist dialing in all the way from Uganda, is now in our midst. Joseph, I have the privilege of inviting you as I introduce you to the audience. Joseph is the CEO of Precision HR as a consultant, and I have known him also as an avid coach, a certified passionate coach who cuts across business experience in private sector and public sector. So Joseph, could you maybe pick on what Adriana has just pointed out and guide us? What's the right way of redefining policy as a manager? Maybe a bird's eye view from HR, but putting yourself in the shoes of the manager.
Thank you very much, Aggie. Good afternoon, colleagues. I'm excited to join you, and unfortunately, you may not be able to see me now because I'm in transit. However, picking up on my fellow panelists' addressing of the need to be agile in performance management, this we cannot overemphasize. There is obviously a lot of change that has happened in the performance management space, in HR management, in people and culture and talent development. And the traditional way of managing performance was that at the very least, you get to see your staff every day. Now, some organizations haven't been together in the same room for a year plus because of the need to work remotely. And now we understand, more importantly, that work is not a location, but rather the value that you bring to your stakeholders, to your colleagues, to your leaders, to your shareholders, to the community that you serve, your community of practice, to your clients. And so that can be delivered anywhere in the world. All you need is the enabling infrastructure and architecture to be able to work remotely. Like right now, I'm in Kampala, or heading out to the eastern part of the country in Uganda. I know there are colleagues in Dar es Salaam, there are colleagues in Nairobi and other parts of Kenya, and as well as Uganda, Entebbe and so on. How are we able to allow this all to happen in such a short amount of time? It's because we've been agile enough to adopt new ways of working and new technology. Now, for managers, the challenge is, are you going to be agile enough to change your performance management metrics, to track, to invest in systems and processes that, even though you don't see your colleagues, you don't see them physically, you're able to monitor them on a dashboard and allow them to self-check on how well they're doing based on their key performance indicators and their scorecards, that they're able to log into a remote solution and a collaborative system or tool that everybody has the same view to. You may not have the same rights to edit and make changes to, but you have the same view to that same system. And regardless of which part of the world you live in, there's a daily dashboard that shows whether you're on amber, green, or red in terms of your performance indicators. And so it ceases to become a case of you like me, you don't like me. No, it's facts, it's figures, it's metrics, it's analytics. It's clear cut and it's possible. It has been done. We've seen organizations that have been able to turn around their fortunes over the last 1 year. You would think that by and large organizations are going to falter and collapse and go out of business. Far from it. As a matter of fact, I support lots of clients, both in my coaching and HR consulting world, that have actually scaled by 10x over the last 12 months, by 5 times, by 2 times, by 4 times. You'd think that's ironic and controversial, perhaps. Yes, it is. But it's because they were willing at the very outset to be agile enough to adopt new ways of working. They may have spent more on training. They may have spent more on developing the staff or on acquisition of new technology. But ultimately, the price has been paid for by the results in their numbers, in their performance, in their figures. And I'll mention a couple of them in a few minutes, but for now, I'll allow that to be my introductory pitch, and over to you, Agnes.
Very nice. Joseph, I knew you're going to draw us to the depth of HR so that we can have very deep thoughts and questions to the people who are on the other side. You know, Adriana here is wondering, where will the money to train in the midst of the pandemic come from? Fred is thinking, invest in new technology in the middle of the pandemic. So I'd like to hear it from the other side. You know, HR is keen on performance, true, maybe a lot more than just performance. But Adriana, at least you come from technology, heavily invested technology companies. You can tell us the value of technology and agile ways of working, perhaps in the middle of the pandemic and looking to the future. What benefit does technology hold?
Okay, thank you, Agnes. Yes, actually, I was just smiling when Joseph was highlighting that we are used of training. So starting on training, it has to continue through e-learning option. Training goes through and people get certified through e-learning. That is one. Secondly, what brings in through technology, honestly, in terms of, I will tell you, like for financial institutions, there's an option of things like internet banking, whereby you can be able to transfer funds from one point of a bank to another point of a bank. You can be able to transact through the m-commerce by purchasing, could be airfare ticket, like you want to travel through emergency, that is possible. You don't have to visit to the banks to do this. You can be able to transfer from a bank account to your device, handset wallet. So all this, it's part of the technology which actually has changed new ways of operating and running our cash flows. Not necessarily that actually you have to be in line, queuing, waiting to transact through ATMs or waiting to transact through at the bank's counters. Again, similarly, technology as well brought in things like subscriptions. You can be able to buy the subscription using your handset while at home, or while like traveling, like the way Joseph is traveling, he can be able to subscribe or unsubscribe any subscription. All that is part of the technology, and all is part of the new ways of operating and driving the experience as a whole. Thank you, Agnes.
Thank you very much, Adriana. Now, Fred, I come to you, and I'm I'm really keen to hear some of the ways your business has reinvented to reduce the human interaction and what that has meant for your new managers. How are they managing their people? How are they managing their customers? And generally human interactions that required, that we face each other.
All right, I think that's a very good question. And the question is, how have we adopted in view of now COVID? Initially, the insurance business was quite interactive on a face-to-face basis. So when you need to buy insurance, you call somebody, you call an insurance agent or a broker, they prepare a proposal for you, they come to see you and take you through. Now, when you decide to buy, eventually, the day you have a claim again, you need to fill the paperwork and so on and so forth. So what we are doing is that a lot of these interactions, we have taken them online. So you find actually in our industry, and not just insurance, but also the entire financial services industry, there was already very significant investment in technology. So when COVID happened, it was just incremental, where you find now the question is, can we get laptops for people so that they can work from home? But there's no actual investment in buying a software, for example, because already this had been invested a long time ago. I think the question is, because of COVID, it brought about the adoption of technology. Not that people bought technology, but it's people adopted technology. So people are now comfortable having an online meeting rather than a face-to-face meeting, and people are more comfortable talking on Teams, receiving a call, banking on phone, and so on and so forth. So the attitude of the people changed, and that enabled the financial services industry to adopt the technology which they had already invested in. So for the young leaders, for example, assistant managers, you are supervising 3, 4, 5, 10 people. I think the biggest challenge for them is to bring people together. Now you have people working in very disparate areas. They are at home, maybe they're in a different county, and you need to coordinate them. I saw a lot of my managers struggling, and we had now to coach them and articulate to them, make sure that you talk to your people on a regular basis. Another issue is these people are used to coming to the office. So when they stay at home, you'd get a measure of loneliness. And again, the question is, how do you deal with that aspect of people are lonely? You don't want that loneliness to proceed into depression. So again, talking to them, encouraging them. The other challenge that we experienced, that I saw, is the issue of performance management. If there is one area where, I don't know what Joseph thinks, but if there's one area that has been left around is automation of performance management. And you find someone is doing one piece of work, then they have to report it elsewhere in another tool, with another tool for purposes of performance management. So you find the young managers, they are struggling, not just the young managers, basically everybody. And you're finding yourself now depending a lot on utmost good faith, that when people say they are on their laptop, they are working, they are actually working. When you call them, you're going to get them as the same way you'd get them in the office, and so on and so forth. So I would say, Agnes, the biggest challenge that I saw is largely social, not financial. It's largely social and on performance management. Thank you very much. Back to you.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. You both touched on technology being the future. And Joseph, Fred, you've even nailed it so well that you had initially, businesses had invested substantial amounts in technology, but the adoption of it was a problem. So the pandemic has kind of fast-tracked our adoption of technology. But now this technology adoption has also brought another host of social issues or challenges, around interaction. And the more I listen to you, Fred, the more I hear this question of trust, how do I trust that somebody is working? And in this part of the world, we all are familiar with the MBWA, management by walking around. It was sort of like the one sure way of getting results from people. So Joseph, maybe you can illuminate some light on this particular aspect of building trust so that managers don't have to feel the need to be physically there to get results. And secondly, driving productivity with open book, an open check of working when I want, where I want, and how I want, and still being able to get the kind of business results we are looking for as managers.
Thank you, Agi. Now, the issue of trust is an ongoing moving target. Just because the trust index is good or high in the organization 1 year or 6 months doesn't mean that in the next phase of 6 months, you'll have a high trust index. And just because the trust index is low in one season, it does not mean that in the next season, you'll have an equally low trust index. You could actually move from a very low trust index of the staff to their leaders and vice versa to a very high trust index if you're consistent in doing certain things. So it's the reason, therefore, that as HR, we want to be consistent in our culture and people management. And the consistency happens in the things that we say. I'm again piggybacking off of Fred's comments earlier and Adriana's as well. The need to communicate cannot be overemphasized. There's one thing that leaders can never do a lot of, or you can never do too much of, and that is to communicate. As a leader, your sole job almost, even before performance, is communication, because how well will people understand how to perform, or what values define you, or what your performance indicators or targets are, what your EBITDA is, what your sales or revenue targets are, what your bottom line should look like, what your people and culture and engagement indices should look like, what your customer satisfaction indices should look like if you don't communicate. So effective communication on mail, by phone, through WhatsApp groups and other forms of collaborative meeting tools, also through shared documents, simple things like Google Drives and many other collaborative tools that allow people, even though they're working remotely, to check in with each other. So at my workplace, we always did something we called the daily check-in. You were at liberty to check in anytime between when you woke up, which could have been from 4 or 5 in the morning, till about 11 or midday, depending on where in the world you are, or what time of the day it is for you, or what you are doing in the morning. So the daily check-in helped us to understand, are you in good health, mentally, physically? Are you feeling wholesome? Is your family okay? We went as far as asking, is your spouse fine? Are your children all right? Now, it wasn't meant to be intrusive. It's just that because we didn't have the benefit of seeing each other face to face like we did before COVID, we needed to find other ways of staying connected. Secondly, the social distancing misnomer, I like to call it a misnomer, that has been spread all around the world, has also done a lot of damage. Because whilst we may be physically distanced, we cannot remain socially distanced. We must remain socially connected. Of course, using interactive tools, using ubiquity. We should be able to stay in touch with one another on a daily basis. And just because we use a lot of technology should not take away our humanness, our ability to connect at a human level. And especially because single people were hit harder because they live by themselves. They don't have a family member that they live with. They don't have a child or a spouse or other relatives. The loneliness gets a little bit too much for them. Even if they are, in fact, introverts, you still need that level of human interaction on an ongoing basis, on a daily basis, to stay mentally healthy and physically healthy too. So yes, we cannot just emphasize technology. We cannot just emphasize delivery and productivity and performance and lose sight of the need to stay healthy mentally and physically and to stay connected socially. Whilst maintaining physical distance, it's physical distancing, we would still need to stay socially connected. So that obviously is something that many organizations have struggled with. Many organizations have struggled with the need to stay connected with their teams at a personal level, on a one-to-one level. And perhaps as I conclude on this segment, is just to advise, to the extent possible, to always find ways to meet physically. And even our clients, Aggie, you and I, we're both on faculty at Strathmore University Business School. Our clients are increasingly demanding for face-to-face interactions or in-person trainings. Yeah, there was a time when it was a fad to do everything virtually, but people realized we still need human interaction. So to the extent possible where you can still get together, of course, maintaining the SOPs and physical distancing and sanitization and all those things to stay safe, you'd still need to find means and ways, especially for smaller teams. It doesn't hurt to get together at least once a month or once a quarter physically to celebrate events, to just have a meal together, because that is ultimately much more important than how big your deliverables are on your numbers, on your top line. Over to you, Aggie.
Thanks a lot, Joseph. Very mind-boggling issues for us to think about. And I'm so glad you brought out the aspect of well-being. And you brought it out in very many different ways, from the social well-being to the health itself as we know it. And there's a question here from Paul Wanjala, who's asking, what are companies doing for the people who have lost jobs because of COVID-19? So Fred, I want to throw that question to you, loss of job, and maybe call it financial well-being, but there's all these other ways of defining well-being in organizations, from the social connection and other ways. And I'm curious to hear how you have handled it, how you have also reinvented to drive connection, of leaders with their people, and to also safeguard the overall well-being of individual and their family units, and also at work in general.
So thank you very much, Angela and Agnes. And I think I would first of all say I'm very grateful to God that in the organization that I work at CIC, no one has lost their job because of COVID. We've been able to, so I've not had the unfortunate opportunity to go through, to respond in that question. However, I know of several organizations which have gone through that. And what I noted, especially now, not just in the insurance industry, but on the banking side, when COVID came up and the numbers, they projected, the plan were not appearing to go in the same direction with what is happening on the ground. And there were indications that there could be redundancies. The first thing that they did was to freeze. They said, this is a difficult time. It doesn't matter about what business circumstances we have. We cannot do redundancies. Of course, for a big organization, you have that choice because you have sufficient reserves. But I'm aware that there are very many other people, maybe teachers in schools were closed, who lost their jobs. And we also have things like places like churches, supermarkets, public service drivers who lost their job immediately. And what happened as the COVID evolved and it was seemingly unrelenting, and many organizations could not sustain. What I have seen most organizations doing is to have some form of grace. So when you have the risk of losing your job, which could affect your health, they extend your health insurance coverage for some extended period. During maybe an additional 6 months or an additional 1 year. Yes, you are not working, but your health, that of your family is covered. So you are not working, but you have this particular package, which would help you even off. You're going to lose your job, so we are going to train you about entrepreneurship. So there are very many interventions that I saw which were available to organizations. But again, I've not had that misfortune of going through that process. Back to you, Agnes.
You're so privileged, Fred, that this hasn't happened in your organization. And I also read the element of humanness because I know business was difficult across different sectors, and insurance sector wasn't spared. I'd like to hear from Adriana. Was it different in your organization, and also from your experiences? You know, you're handling a huge pool of customers, and they've given you their own stories. I know we have entrepreneurs in this audience today who have had to make those tough choices of redundancies. What advice have you seen working to those that have lost their jobs or have been affected in one way or another?
Okay, thank you, Agnes. What we experienced through some of our customers, actually, even for us within the organization, we did not undergo any loss of jobs. However, some of the other organizations, they've faced similar situation. And what they've done, which worked well for them, is one, during this transition of retrenchment, what they did, they had to dedicate a company to support on counseling them and bringing in financial institutions and people who are entrepreneurs to sell some ideas through these people who are going to be affected. Again, in terms of medical insurance, despite that we are part of the termination process, what they had done is they've given them a 6-month leeway for the services of medical insurance to happen. So actually, that wouldn't stress an individual while losing a job, but assurance that health insurance is still being covered for the next 6 months. The payout, they went way above on what the regulation is directing the organization to do as per the Ministry of Labor laws. So that really gave some comfortability to the individuals which were affected. They were not left as if they did not matter or have not contributed anything important which is valuable to the organization. Rather, it was a good handshake between an employer and a retrenched employee, which I think that was brilliant. Historically, I've never seen those kind of humanity which has been considered just because with the situation which the organization is in. However, considering this particular individual who has worked for 3, 4, 5, 6 years, and actually who needs to lose that particular job. So I saw that being a very good approach, which some organizations have really taken that route, which people left the organization happy, because even some of the fixed assets like laptop were left to them. They were never taken. The counseling, they had to pay for employee wellness programs, which actually an employee can call in at any point of time, or the family member when they get stressed up for any cancellation and consolation. And the leadership really took good, close caring of these employees, hand-holding them, even checking them, how are they moving on while they're out of the job, not just like giving them the payout and leaving them that now it becomes your problem. I've never worked with you, I've never engaged with you before. I think that was a brilliant approach. With this couple of 2, 3 organizations, they've undergone through that similar approach.
This again, a very interesting twist and a very good way of addressing, you know, the wellness of the human being. I'm very sure there are managers here who have had to deal with the burden of losing some of their employees, you know. And of course, when they lose the employee, the workload increases and it has to be done by the team that remains. So Joseph, maybe you can weigh in on this one. How can managers handle job overloads when they are created by layoffs or any other reason during the pandemic? And maybe also throw in from a HR perspective, what are some of the things that managers should consider when they are having to let go of people during this tough time? Because I think the implications are far-reaching, and these redundancies are likely to continue into the future.
Yeah, unfortunately, we have to also address these concerns because it's just the reality of life. Some organizations have gone out of business and others are struggling. And therefore, in order to stay alive, they have painfully taken the decision to ask some people to step aside. And then they have to optimize on the remaining human capital vis-a-vis the workload. Now, it's not easy. There are no easy ways around it. Again, the best thing is coming back again to the issue of communication, to understand that for those who have remained, the workload might be a little bit more, but then to understand how best to share it among ourselves and to say, it's not a punishment. You're privileged, we are privileged that we still have work to do and value to add to our shareholders and our partners and staff and clients. So let's do it in the best of our circumstances. And of course, using our business continuity plans and models to remodel and refactor in the increased workload, the increased hours, but at the same time, the increased pressure on targets and numbers. Now, of course, you need to give yourselves a little bit of headroom. It's not necessary to be overly ambitious. If you had 50 staff and you're delivering 1 million Kenya shillings in value, there's no point having 25 staff and still insisting on delivering that 1 million Kenya shillings in value, case in point. So you might want to adjust your targets as well and be realistic and talk to the shareholders when you meet the board in those quarterly meetings and let them understand that we're living in very interesting times, but the agile organizations are the ones that will change and that will remain in business for the long haul. So in your business continuity plans, you might want to factor in a 2-year period, 24 months, or even 36 months, and be realistic about it. Now, that's not to say, of course, that you must not watch for the work overload and burnout. That is a risk, a very possible risk. So in the employee workplace assistance programs that we have, you need to then loop in people, professionals like psychologists, like counselors, like therapists, just to provide that additional buffer of support. And then from a physical wellness point of view, to say what else can we do for our teams, because now they are probably pushing in an extra 2 or 3 hours every day than they would ideally have under normal circumstances. So to factor in additional recreation, additional recognition as well, and reward for the extra time that they're putting in. And as soon as the numbers begin to flip, and I know I've spoken to many shareholders and directors and owners of businesses, clients, who are reluctant to go back to the former headcount because they have saved a lot of money on the payroll and their OPEX, that it's tempting to almost want to stay that way. But that's not ideal, because you're really, really pushing the envelope and you're hurting the staff that have remained, and ultimately you risk losing them because of work burnout, stress, and other ailments. So they might leave simply because they get disengaged from the overload. So once the numbers begin to look good again, they go from red to amber and to green, then please, at the earliest possible opportunity, take your headcount back to optimal capacity. And also, if you are touched on the payroll by reducing wages, perhaps by 25 or 50% or whatever the case might have been, once the numbers begin to bounce back, again, constantly communicating with the staff and letting them know, we're going back to 75%, we're going back to 100% of the payroll. Perhaps we may have not got a bonus last year, but this year the numbers are looking good. So here is your 13th check. Here is your performance bonus. Here is your increment, your percentage increment. But you can't do it in the dark. So this calls for absolute integrity on the part of shareholders and business owners and directors. Those executives and directors must be honest and brutally honest with their staff to tell them that, yes, we're struggling, but all hope is not lost. And whenever the numbers look good every end of month or every end of quarter, to have the honesty to go back to the board and say, hey, let's bump up our numbers and go back to optimal headcount, or perhaps go back to optimal salary. Now, if all else fails, unfortunately, which might actually happen, again, to be honest enough with your staff to say that we will respect the provisions of your contracts, we will respect the provisions of the Employment Act, and ensure that at separation, you get all your gratuity and terminal benefits and dues and NSSF and whatnot, provident funds, any benefits that are due and that have accrued, inclusive of leave. This is not the time to be clever and try and dodge the responsibility. It's a lot easier to be compliant than to be uncompliant, because ultimately we run the risk of going into litigation. If staff members say, I was terminated unfairly, even though they called it a restructuring, I think there was some malice, aforethought, and then they go to the industrial courts. And next thing we know, we're in a lot of trouble legally and also from a reputational point of view. So again, it's being authentic as leaders, being honest to our staff, being honest to the people that we support, and saying, this is the situation, and use numbers. Don't just depend on a wish list. Use metrics, use analytics, use reporting, use the EBIT, use your share of the market value, your return on whatever it is that you're investing in. And the staff actually know these things because they're the ones that work in the finance departments. So they know those numbers, and the audit department, they know the numbers. So if you lie to them, they'll know you're lying. Perhaps keep you going stronger, or understand that things have gone south and the company may not afford to keep them. They will not question that if it's done in fairness and with integrity and honesty. And you should always keep the door open for that possibility to rehire. I know one particular client that we support. I won't say the name for obvious reasons. They had a headcount of 200. In the heat of COVID, they had to downsize 50% of that headcount. They went down to 100. But now, and then worst case scenario, in addition to going down to 100 staff, they cut salary to 50%. And at some point, they completely lost all their business. They went down to 25%. You were home, you had no work to do whatsoever. You didn't appear at the office for months, but at least you had your medical insurance, you had 25% of your salary, and you had food being delivered at the office. So every month you could come and pick a food hamper, from the office. So the staff stayed connected to the employer. They knew things were tough for the employer, but they knew that the employer was caring and open and honest with them. Now they've gone back to 75%, and they are in the next, I think by 1st of June, they'll be back at 100%. And their headcount, surprise, surprise, has moved back from 100, which was the number they had in May of last year when we finished the first phase of restructuring. They are now back to 180. And by June, they should be back at 100%, which is 200 of their staff, the full headcount that they started with. So that typically showed me that in a case where the employer is honest, the employees will trust the employer. And let me tell you, except a few who had gotten jobs elsewhere, the vast majority of the staff were willing to come back when they were contacted by HR and to be told that, your job has opened up again, please come and continue. But of course, they had already been paid their full benefits earlier. So they trusted the organization. They knew they were not telling them lies because they had gone on with decent packages to take care of the downtime they were experiencing. And they still had food rations and hampers. So this is sort of a typical example where the employer is willing to be authentic with their staff and willing to make those necessary changes where the need arose. Yeah, over to you, Agnes.
Very nice, interesting aspects of transparency and being authentic as organizations and as representatives of organizations. I want to spin this now in a bit more of a focus on the new managers. I've been teaching on the new managers program across the region over the last 5 years. And even before the pandemic, there was a challenge of moving from individual contributor into manager for the first time, and then the pandemic. I'm wondering whether there's a specific set of skills for new managers as leaders, different from that of people like Adriana, who've been in management for 20 years. And what advice would you give, Adriana, to the new managers in this Zoom classroom today? How can they navigate in their newness and still be effective leaders?
Okay, thank you, Agnes. I was smiling as you were talking about this because all of us, including myself, I was once not a manager before I became a manager. And honestly, key thing what I would advise the rest of the colleagues is that first of all is understanding that now you are a leader. However, you need to have a mechanism of getting your things done through prioritization, simple basic things, having your to-do list with you. And as the way you lead the team, you need to kind of start learning who has what kind of a strength, so that when you have multiple tasks, you will be able to assign same time different tasks and have a time for you to review before submitting to your head of department or to your director. That is one. Secondly, when you drive the KPIs through the team, you need to set very clearly KPIs which are smart. And when I say smart, meaning your KPIs needs to be very specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and they need to have specific timeline. And you need to say what would be the measure of success look like, so that every now and then when these people who you are leading them, you don't struggle, they don't turn around and start challenging you. Actually, instead of, I failed to deliver this particular KPI because I was doing X, Y, Z. So when you set your KPIs, you have to set your expectation very clearly by indicating and highlighting what would the success look like in terms of measure of success, so that when you review, then it becomes very easy that actually this particular individual has delivered or this particular individual has not delivered this specific KPI. You have to do a lot of engagement with the team. Despite that you are a leader, yes, but you need to be very close with the team so that they don't let you down. Not being close meaning you have to be friends with them, but you need to build a trust. They need to trust you and you need to trust them. But the trust does not come automatically, just a one-day thing. It's a journey. So you need to create that journey with the team. Well, actually you are setting the expectation very clearly. If you're supposed to deliver your report at 12 midday, for instance, what does it mean? Meaning the team who you delegate some of the tasks, you need to make sure actually they deliver to you maybe at 10. Give yourself an hour and a half to review and that back forth for corrections, because you will not be able to do everything as an individual. You need to have people who needs to be able to support you. There are things you will do yourself, but most of the things you need to drive through people. I usually like saying getting things done through others. So you need to do that kind piece of it. But at the same time, you need to be a person whereby you have your prioritization. What are the things which you must do them now? What are the things which you have to do them soon? What are the things which you have to do later on? And what are the tasks which can wait? They don't have an impact, can wait. So once you categorize in these 4 quadrants, then it becomes very easy for you when you review your to-do list of the day. It will give you assurance that actually out of the 10 tasks, how many you've been able to deliver and what is next. The following day, you have to set the expectation. So there has to be a very close working together basis. But again, the earlier you start understanding the team which you are leading in terms of their strengths, it will give you an opportunity to leverage their strengths and maximizing them while you're focusing on those strategic things. I've tried to summarize because otherwise I could talk and talk and talk.
Yeah, maybe I could weigh in on this matter. And I think I became an assistant manager in the year 2011. And I could just try to speak into the challenges. I was an officer from 2005 to 2011, then I got promoted. And I would like to speak into that journey and possibly establish the insights which I now have. And what I realize, what makes you get promoted from an officer to a man, to a young leader. And one thing that I realized, it is how well you do your officer work. That's what gets you seen, that people realize this gentleman or this lady has something to offer. So you are so good and possibly the best in the team. And now you have been doing this work alone, and now you have been given a team to manage. I would speak, one of the challenge that I had to learn with, first of all, is to delegate. I had to accept that now it is not me working, it is me enabling other people to work. And the question, how do you do this? The other question, and it remains a challenge today, when you are a high performance individual and you want to get everybody operating at that level. But that's why we are 6 billion of us here. There are 6 billion permutations. So you find you need to be self-aware of yourself. You need to be self-aware. Am I happy? Am I getting frustrated? Because the moment you start walking through that journey of frustration, if you're not aware, you're going to lash out. And when you lash out, you're going to start dealing with social issues and underperformance, and your team will not believe in you. So I think that critical skill of delegating and being self-aware, as a leader, you must be self-aware. And you find a lot of responsibilities for young leaders or for people in management position, not executive. You are expected to coordinate work. When you are a junior officer or an officer, work is brought to your desk. You are told today is Monday, and today you are doing this work. You didn't give, as opposed to a manager, and you are told today, this is a whole week, and this is the amount of work you have, and you have 5 team members to work with. Coordinate, allocate the work to them, monitor them, hold them accountable, and motivate them. So you can see it's a very different dimension from saying, I am good, but now it becomes, we are good. And if you're not self-aware, then again, it can, I think I have a lot I'd like to speak about, but I think largely self-awareness has worked for me. It's an area I had to develop, and the issue of just monitoring, coordinating, and appreciating that people are different. Back to you, Agnes.
Very interesting insights that as I listen to Adriana and Fred, I can feel that if you haven't had any training, the insights you get today should be good to help you rejig your style of leadership and try to coordinate work better, allocate resources better, set goals better that are smart, delegate, and even move from I, like Fred has said, to we. You know, it's a real transition. And I see we are now just over the hour. We should be getting to the tail end of our discussions. And I'd like to bring back the conversation of, yes, I am a new manager. These are the things I need to do. As much as I'm struggling, how can I support management in driving the strategy? And I think, Adriana, I had you allude to the discussion of the strategic conversations. And I want to marry this with the question that Paul Wanjala again has thrown in there, you know, talking about millennials. How do we integrate millennials? And now I'm noting that we are just about 5 generations in the workplace. So it's not about millennials anymore. It's how do I work with that traditionalist? How does he work with me? How do I work with the new entry centennials into the job market? And how do we get buy-in across all different generations? You know, Paul talks of getting management to listen to you, but I think it's a lot more all of us getting to listen to one another and really carry the strategy forward. Adriana?
Okay, thank you, Agnes. In terms of, if I may understand your question clearly, in a simple language, is how do you get a buy-in from the management, right?
Yes.
What I would say with my experience up to date, this is what has worked well for me, and I think for sure some of us it will work well as well. While you debate or while you want to get an easy buy-in for a decision making, basically is I always challenge myself that I have to do my homework well. And when I say I have to do my homework well is if I want to propose a certain change of a process, for instance, like when I used to work for financial institution, multiple times I was able to implement things which across Africa had never been implemented before. But it because I went through to the management with the benchmarking. I like doing a lot of benchmarking through same industry. I worked in financial institutions, so looking on what does the best top financial institution does on something which I want to push the management to implement. Like, to be very specific, I would say I introduced custodian allowance. Across Africa, no country was paying custodian allowance. But I went through comparing myself in the same industry of financial institution. Local banks were paying custodian allowance. So I built my clarification to the management on why I think it's critical. These are the people who actually are handling large cash, which gets deposited to the central bank. And there are a lot of theft happening in between. If I look myself at the money which I used to get into the overs and short loss, comparing to number of branches which I had, and my competitors, I had more branches, they had fewer branches, and they did not have, the loss was almost to zero. So these custodians felt appreciated and somehow motivated with those allowances. So just by making that comparison and actually saying, out of total number of banks in Tanzania, these 7 top large banks, similarly to ours, they are paying this allowance, but for us, we are not paying the allowance. And by the end of the day, I ended up paying the highest custodian allowance more than competitors. So even I was able to even to gain certain talents from other banks because of that custodian allowance. So it's how you pitch it in a strategic way, but with a benchmarking. Benchmarking has been working well for me even today. When you do benchmarking, then your argument and your proposal becomes more stronger. You are not starting with a pitch that I don't want to implement this, but rather I would recommend, suppose we think about this, comparing us with other similar operators or similar organization. This is what they are offering. Suppose let's try to do this, and this is how we can start it. And with that, then actually people get an easy buy-in to support your idea. Thank you, Agnes.
Thanks a lot, Adriana. I'd like Fred to dive in and talk about the multi-generational complexities in the workplace. How do we deal with this?
All right. The issue of multi-generational, I think the bigger thing about multi-generational, from my experience and my perspective, is the level of engagement. I think the younger generation would want to be engaged more than the older generation. You find the older generation, they would, once you give them their work, they take the work and they get it done. But you find the younger generation, they would want more engagement, and they want to know that they are appreciated in one way or another. However, also the younger generation, the good thing about the younger generation is that it's also flexible. So they are open to new ideas. So in an organization where the environment is changing, for example, in the insurance industry, you find the adoption of technology at the workplace, willingness to look at things at a different perspective is more likely to succeed with the younger generation. So I would say for each generation, it has something to give. We can't say this generation is better than this other, and they have something to learn from each other. So I'd like to speak to the question that Wanjala raised. And he was asking, how do you get your voice heard? How do you pass your ideas? How do you make sure they are adopted? And I think that's a very fundamental question that has a profoundly simple answer. And that is, give value. People look at organizations differently, but as long as you're a profit-oriented organization, the primary purpose is to create value, or in other words, wealth. And each person in that organization, they are brought on board to create value. So what you realize is, as long as you are creating value, you'll be noticed by people. And the one thing that I've seen with a lot of people is getting comfortable with good enough performance. You know, you just do the bare enough to keep you on the job, but you don't go the extra mile. I think it is something I saw with my peers. And when you go the extra mile, people notice you. And when people notice that this individual goes the extra mile, they start taking you seriously. And the more serious you take, the more your ideas would get considered. The most important thing to know is that there are many people with many ideas. So actually, there is competition for ideas. There are people who want, I want to be seen, I want to be promoted. The thing is, you are not the only one. So how do you get seen? And how you do that is by creating value. Creating value, how you carry yourself, how you articulate, how you communicate, and so on and so forth. Back to you, Agnes.
Thanks a lot, Fred. Very interesting insights on how we can coexist. There is value when we look at each generation and appreciate the uniqueness they bring to the table and actually utilize that to make the organization a better place. I'd like to hear it from a HR perspective. Joseph, welcome back, and tell us, you know, when it comes to this multi-generational workforce, how do we motivate each? And are they motivated by different things? If we could just deep dive into what keeps each one coming to work happy and engaged. Joseph, maybe you can type in your answer to the audience. I think that is a very interesting aspect of motivation and the multi-generational workforce. We're coming to the tail end. You know, this is like the real tail end of our discussions. And just before I give it back to Clive and Caroline, I'd like to give the panelists an opportunity to think through their parting shots. So before we get to hear the parting shot, I'd like to invite Clive to tell us a little bit more about what there is in the new managers leadership program. What should we expect to find when we join the program? And then I'll throw it back to the panelists to talk about their, you know, one last final parting shots.
Thank you, Agnes, and the panelists for very, very engaging discussions. I think I'm learning a lot also from this. Mine is very simple. Mine is to bring about a program that touches on what we have just gone through, the different aspects that have been brought out by our panelists. That is the new managers leadership program. So this is our entry-level leadership program that focuses on having, sorry, are you able to see the screen? Agnes, can confirm from your end?
It was on and then it's gone blank, Clive.
Okay.
It's back.
Yeah, there you go. Let me cover my video so that it's clearer. So this is a program, it's an entry-level leadership program that will enable you to consolidate everything that has been said today and more. So some of the skills that you learn from this is effective presentation, communication skills, team dynamics, planning and budgeting, effective feedback process, problem solving, decision making, and different management styles. So I'm only touching very high level on this, but you can have discussions in deeper on what we offer. So who is the target participant? It's very ideal for newly appointed managers, individuals who have been groomed for their first management position. Number two, managers who are experiencing new pressures like what you're going through right now, the pandemic, and need to upskill their current skills. And lastly, seasoned managers also who seek to upskill or to have an overall management and leadership skill. So that's the target participant that you're looking at. Just to reiterate on the key focus area, developing and integrating approach to business and management, effective implementation of business strategies, making effective decision at first level management, gaining a broader perspective of results-oriented management, building core managerial and functional skills, and lastly, understanding how business functions interrelate. So these are the key function areas that we're going to be looking at in the program. And due to the pandemic, we are going to offer this program online. Normally we have it in person, but due to what you're going through, we have decided to take it online. We did it last year. We had very good 2 sessions. We had participants from as far as Belgium, the West Africa. I think we had Nigeria, who are there. Uganda, definitely, Tanzania, and Kenya. So for this year, we're going to have a 9-day program that's starting from 24th of May to the 4th of June. You can see the cost is $700, and for the Kenyans, it's $69,950. And mode of delivery, as mentioned, it's online. So it's open to even participants here from Nigeria. We had, I think, 3 participants from Nigeria who are doing this. So feel free to apply. And for further details, we have your contacts. You can always engage further in this. So thank you, Agnes. Back to you.
Thanks a lot, Clive. I have seen one final question. I think it will be unfair for us to leave this question here. It's a very interesting one. It also speaks to some of the nuances of having to deal with people differently. And so I'm going to ask Dr. Adriana to take it up. How do you approach and build team spirit in a group that has got a totally adverse working relationship? That's an interesting one, especially when you have a manager who is new to the organization. It also continues to ask, how do you deal with people who feel more entitled than the others? I mean, if you're in this organization, Adriana, and your team feels that they are superior to you, how will you deal with that?
Okay. Thank you, Agnes. I'm smiling because you know, these kind of questions sometimes they flash back the real situation. I recall when I moved from one bank to another bank, and basically the perception was you've met us here, we've been here for 10 years, and you are new as a general manager of shared distribution, so we know better than you, those kind of things. So what I actually did is once I noted on that, I actually started having one-on-one sessions with each direct report, and then later on with the team to get to know them. But at the same time, it was more of setting my expectation without considering the factoring that there was a lot of this discussion. This lady is coming there. She's very tough. She's a pusher. She wants to see results. She's more of results oriented and all these kind of things. And it is true. So basically, I had one-on-one discussions, and in between, one of the person actually decided to share the views that, you know, since when you've come, we have this daily operations meeting. I think we are not too used of this meeting. And I say, thank you for the feedback. However, usually I do these meetings only for us to be well aligned and to understand areas which I need to support the team, I'm a person who is hands-on and would like to know everything what happens within my unit. Hence, these meetings shall continue for me to be able to support the team. I'll not be able to support the team if I'll not be fully engaged on what is happening on the ground and what are the challenges which the team are experiencing. Hence, these are the kind of the things which we should expect, and it will continue. The other one came in and said, you know what, I can't be in the office at 8, I've used to be at 9. And it is true. So I said, I'm happy to understand that, but I would like us to step back and try to recall the contract which we've signed off, at what time we are supposed to be in the office. I will not want you to be beyond on what is expected of you based on the contract which you have signed. So I'm only asking you to abide on what actually has been signed off by you with the organization. It was not an easy discussion. Those things happen, but you just need to be firm. You should control your emotions. You should not be emotional at all, because emotions, when you are a leader, being an emotional person does not work. It would never work, because every now and then they will try to make you emotional. And when you get emotional, you may do things which are completely different under the perspective as a leader to demonstrate to the team. So you really need to control your emotions, but you need to remain steady. You need to be confident, and you need to be transparent, very clear on what is your expectation, and have consistency of tracking whatever you've committed on yourself as an objective. You need to have a consistency. If you say, this is how I would want all of us to work, and it happens that actually some of the days you don't do the meetings, for instance, some of the days you do the meeting, then you bring in inconsistency, and this is where they will play around and make your emotions go up there to the ceiling board. So once you manage yourself accordingly on those prospective areas, I'm telling you, you'll find it like a magic, but there's no magic. It's a flow which you are creating from day one, and remain steady and consistent. Because by the end of the day, whatever the set, how I've set it that at 8, we have to start our meeting, I'm telling you, nobody was coming late. It is possible. Though you have to be firm, you need to control yourself. You should leave away emotional. You should understand that you are dealing with people who have different perspectives, who have different behaviors. Hence, they will never be the same as you, as an individual, as a leader by that time. And remember, there are some of the people as well, they would have wanted to be under that position, which they are not able to get that opportunity. So seeing you coming from outside, grabbing that opportunity while they're there, they've been there for a couple of years, sometimes it doesn't bring in happiness. So as long as you understand there are all these situations which may occur, you remain steady, you think positivity, that actually, you know what, this is what I want to deliver, and this is how I want to run the business, which is in a fair manner. You are not overruling anybody. You are working and operating in a professional way. Hence, it will flow. It will go through. So just have confidence, be yourself, set expectation very clearly, and be consistent. Thank you, Agnes.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Adriana. I think we are really, really, really learning. And now we are coming to the tail end of our conversation. So I've got 1 minute for each of you to give your final parting shots. We're gonna keep it crisp, short and sweet. And I'm gonna start with Fred. Joseph has just given me a signal that he's gotten to a shaky section. And if he can hear me, Joseph, you'll go next, and then Adriana will close for us with a final shot.
Thank you very much. I think for me, for a new leader, the most important thing to ask yourself, what vision do you have for your new role? And what do you see you doing for the company where you are working in 1 year's time? What difference are you going to bring? The thing is, if you don't have a vision, anything is good enough. And a lot of people, when you ask them, so tell me, what do you want to do? They have no answer for that. The moment you don't wait for somebody to ask you, you are the one saying, this is what I want. I have a choice of all these things, but I choose this one and I'm working towards this one. It is very important that you have vision. Number 2, and the last one, you need to have skills, and you need to be aware what skills do you have and what skills do you need to develop. A lot of time you find people, they come to work, they go home. If you don't have a vision, you don't know what you have and what you need to get. Time goes by and so on and so forth. So I'm inviting you to be very open to learning. There's a lot of learning happening at Strathmore. I was actually a student there once, I think in the year 20, I've been a student there for some time, yeah. So around 2012, 2013, 2014, there's a lot of learning that is available online. If you go to Coursera, you go to EDX, online learning. So I challenge you to adopt the attitude of lifelong learning, but you don't need to go to school to learn. There is somebody who knows what you need to know. Talk to them, get close to them and learn. Thank you very much. And thank you all.
Wow, thank you so much, Fred. You began the conversations by talking about the importance of communication. Now you've closed out saying everybody needs to have their vision and share it. And lastly, become a student of lifelong learning. Thank you very much, Fred, for joining us. Very powerful insights. I really have learned a lot from you. Joseph, if you're in a stable place, we'd love to hear your final shots.
Thank you so much, Agnes. And thank you so much, Fred. Thank you so much, Adriana, and everybody who has been able to join us today, Clive, and all the learners who have joined us on this webinar. I think that for me, most importantly, is to not lose our humanness in the midst of all this. We can talk performance, we can talk technology, digitization, automation, ubiquity of work, remote working solutions, learning management systems, and software.
Sorry, Joseph, I'm struggling to hear you. Wow, Joseph just dropped off as he was talking about his final shot. I got to hear 2 very key words, and the first one is don't lose your humanness. So I'm trying to summarize what I picked from Joseph. Do not lose your humanness in the midst of technology and dashboards and all these new ways of working that we have to adopt in organizations. And secondly, be solutions oriented. I think that links to what Fred said. Be a student of lifelong learning. Look for solutions. They are there. Adriana, you have the privilege of closing out for us with your final parting shots.
Okay, thank you very much, Agnes, panelists, and all the attendees in this forum. Basically, what I would say today, the attendees, you are a new manager. One thing which you need to ask yourself is, who do you want to be after being a manager today? What is your next aspiration? Set a career aspiration for yourself. Where do you want to move to the next level? Today you are a manager, meaning you should not get satisfied and comfortable being a manager. Secondly, always be yourself. Try not to imitate to be somebody else instead of you as an individual. Be results oriented by doing all the kind things which we've explained to you. Believe in yourself. If you don't believe in yourself, it will become a blocker on you as a leader. So believe in yourself. Always trust, yes, you can. And I'll tell you confidently, go for it. Have aspiration. If you don't have a mentor to support you to your next aspiration. If you don't have a career aspiration, you'll become yourself a manager today and remain as a manager. Dream a dream which scares you. If you don't dream a dream that scares you, then meaning you've not dreamed yet. Thank you very much.
Very powerful insights. Wow, I feel challenged. It was nice to close out with you, Adriana. You're already challenging us to have our next aspiration. Being a manager isn't a destination, it's just a start. You need a mentor to support your next aspiration. So dream and dream dreams that scare you. And lastly, be yourself and believe in that self, because that is the self that will take you to your next big dream. So I come to a conclusion with this very powerful insights from our well-versed pool of panelists. I want to bring this to a close by really thanking each and every one of you panelists, Dr. Adriana all the way from Tanzania, Joseph Ajal all the way from Uganda. He told me he's just about to get to the source of River Nile at Jinja City. He's been very, very audacious with his time to make sure that he's able to still connect with us. Thank you very much. And Fred, our very own here in Kenya. This is a truly East African panel sharing experiences from across the region, and we are truly, truly grateful and honored to have all of you. I also want to thank our attendees for staying in to learn. I've seen the hunger for knowledge, the type of interactions on the chat, questions streaming in, that are quite real. We appreciate your time. If it wasn't for you, we wouldn't have been here for the last 90 minutes, keeping the conversation going. So we really appreciate you, and also challenge you once more to have aspirations, dream big, and just commit to a lifelong journey of learning. So thank you so much. And obviously, I end with the team from Strathmore University Business School for such an amazing platform, and for putting this very good team together to help share knowledge, and to the entire team that is behind the success of this webinar. We are very grateful, and we continue to learn. Until next time, we stay connected to learning. Thank you very much. I've been informed that there's a feedback link. I can already see it on the chat. Just before you drop off, be kind to share with us some feedback that can help us to improve, be it on the quality, be it new topics, whatever it is that you would like us to know. We do appreciate your feedback. Check on the chat and you will find the link, and we are truly, truly grateful to you. Thank you.